Dear human species, a note from an ally, a special request from your dear friend, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Whilst driving on your interstates and your super freeways and your elevated toll roads, please, for the love of sweet baby Jesus or whoever you idolize in your mind and pray to in the closet of closets, please, dear God, learn how to use your blinkers and merge correctly. Because no matter where I have driven on this planet, no matter where I have paid attention to the driving, like 65% of all y'all are doing it wrong. This is the Almost Daily Zencast. Hello, and namaste. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get started. Good morning, folks. Welcome to a thematically blurry episode of the Almost Daily Zencast / Good Morning Trumptopia. I didn't quite find the pre-existing assets in native graphic program, so I can edit the way I would want to. So I patched something together that is less than satisfactory, and I already don't remember what it says. But welcome to today's show. It is Friday, September 10th, 7:44 a.m. It's the eve of a great anniversary, and also the 234th day of the Blue Tyrant's tyranny of being in office. And I'm surprised I didn't comment on it on the air sooner, but I guess I've been distracted and focused on things and not doing the show as often as I'm supposed to, according to, the vision and the whole idea of it. But here we are, nonetheless. Here's the thought. Kudos and congratulations to everybody who feels like I do that we survived the imminent attempt at manifesting a magical, irrational political reinstatement of Donald Trump. Some sort of, I imagine, I must theorize. I think that's the right term I'm looking for in the construction I'm trying to build. I must theorize speculatively, because I'm not sure. And they've been very weird about it in their public discourse. And I don't mean that too disparagingly. I just mean that they've been very unusual. Everyone in the Q/Trump camp that I have personally tried to have public discourse about this has been unorthodox, let us say, in their manner of discussing it. And definitely not in any way, shape, or form committed to any sort of straightforward answer about any of the questions that anybody might ask them. But it seemed as though the Trump/Q movement, if we want to isolate all the Venn diagram of members of the GOP, people who blindly, faithfully believe in Trump, and also have hooked, line, and sinkered themselves with everything involved in the confusing complex of content known as Q, because it certainly isn't very straightforward. But I think there was a serious desire to attempt to manifest some sort of quasi movement of the people, of the base, some sort of, unleashing of the patriot power, if we can coin a term, the patriot power of some sort of convergence between some hitherto undeclared military of the people, sort of for the people movement within the industrial military complex, or the military industrial complex, or the complex of military industry, whichever one your universe most commonly uses, and the people exclusively who find themselves in this very sort of specific subset of what can be generally referred to as the right-wing end of the spectrum of politically engaged, politically motivated, politically thinking individuals who happen to also be citizens of the United States of America. And I guess they imagined that there was some faction, some hitherto undisclosed faction, and they seem to believe that they have evidence to indicate this, but I was never shown anything that made any effing conclusive sense. It was all riddles and puns and memes and weird playground insult riddled declarations of vague notions of patriotic uprising, as preserved, as many people from all factions like to point out, in the Constitution. But the Constitution is also, riddled with a bunch of other things that get in the way of that. Not the least of which, in my humble opinion, is the reality, which is a hard pill for many people, regardless of political ideology, to swallow. The reality that as written, and I think perhaps arguably as intended by the Founding Fathers, it tends to give more protection of rights to capital itself and those that control it than people as citizens, right? Like the big flaw with democracy as America established it was that it originally only those who owned land, literally landed gentry, to borrow a term from a country we supposedly rejected everything from, or about, or of, that we, the mythology whitewashes away, because we totally just went, oh yeah, only the landed gentry can vote. That was the consensus. That was the ideal. That's why, etc., etc., etc. Hold those thoughts. Put a big pin in that. I'm not a Constitution hater, right? But as I've talked about recently in the Belief episode, I'm not a blind faith ardent believer in it either, because it's not an article of faith. It's a political manifesto that needs a lot of work and a lot of upgrading and a lot of updating to live up to its own fanciful notions of itself in terms of the, vis-a-vis the, quote, American dream. And that it shouldn't be, if people are willing to point to its clause about overthrowing a tyrannical government in terms of the current functioning government, half of which is their own people, which makes no sense, right? All government is corrupt, except for these people that we put into government, except they must clearly be involved with the corruption, but we'll just ignore that part. But never mind. Put a pin in that, too. Put that up on the board. What was I saying? I digress. That was all a sidebar. Welcome to the show. It is, for those of you who may or may not have caught on yet, formatted in the following way, as expressed on the show's main profile over at Sprecher.com, which is brought to you by iHeartRadio. I've always wanted a legitimate thing to say that's like that, like a cutesy radio thing to say and pretend to be on the radio station. And I don't really have one because no one brings you this show besides me on my free time when I haven't blown out my voice talking to, too much family members on the phone or whatnot, or friends and things, or busy with other stuff. No one pays me to do this show, except for you, dear audience, by tolerating the fact that it is monetized and you have to listen to the same stupid ads over and over again. Please forgive me, but I'm trying to make this trying to take this from my hobby to my side hustle to my main hustle in a Project Warp Speedy kind of way. This is, as I was about to explain to you, an experimental, and I mean that quite sincerely, an experimental freeform bunny ears, quote, talk radio style, end quote, audio blog podcast entertainment show, which is based in part in sort of me thinking out loud about my fan fiction of this crazy universe and what I would write as one of my many complicated steps at trying to like write about it, but also my real life, sincere and, honest yet sort of anonymized opinion. I can never be accused of being politically correct, but I do think I reserve the right to not violate my own free speech rights, right? Some people understand that sentence. Some people think that doesn't make sense. There are three kinds of people in this world, dear friends, and I'm not one of those two I just pointed out. Well, I guess technically that does make sense to me, but I digress. If you are curious about the creator of this show, the artist artistically known as the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, please drop on by the little like share website of many websites, the little bookmarky page, solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. That's me. That's my own just collection of bookmarks for things that you might want to visit if you are curious and interested in engaging with this host personality in ways, being part of the community that I'm trying to build around this online podcast entertainment show. Welcome to the show. Thank you for tuning in. We've got listeners from around the world, and I occasionally like to do a little current featured country shout-out highlight. Top countries listening to the show right now in the last, let's set to 30 days. Let's get crazy. Let's set it to 7 days. So don't get jealous, world. This is just the last 7 days. We'll flip over to 30 days to see anybody we might have missed. But from the tiny nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Sorry, my eyesight is getting a little fuzzy there from a distance. All the way to New Zealand, the Netherlands, France, Spain, Brazil, Austria, Germany, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And of course, always at the top of the list, India. Namaste, my friends over there in India. Thanks for tuning in. Shout out to all of you from around this living platform for life, this living uterus chiseled in rock and water and stone. That didn't make sense, but anyways. So other countries, I flipped to the 30 days, right? I'm looking at my official show, not Dianetics. That's the name of a book that I don't endorse. I do not endorse Dianetics. Well, I cannot endorse it because I've never read it. I just remember the commercials, the overly aggressively overplayed commercials from whatever era that they were really, really kind of mainstreaming that book. And I can't say that I ever felt compelled to read it. It never really called to me. But I digress. That's neither here nor there. I don't want to offend anybody who's totally in love with that book. Just trying to say hello and greetings. And someday I'll have a list of learned, that's the wrong use of that term, of memorized greetings in all these different languages. I'm working on it. I'm compiling the list. I've made the meme. I just haven't memorized all the greetings. But there are listeners tuning into the show in Chile, Ireland, Australia, Portugal, Tunisia, Turkey, Antigua and Barbuda. Sorry, I couldn't quite see that one. I'm leaning back in my chair, and some of the words are blurry. Uruguay, Austria, Spain, New Zealand, Switzerland, Netherlands, Japan, Brazil, France, Mexico. Already said Germany, and Canada, and the UK, and the United States, and India. But there you go. Thanks for tuning in, folks. All kinds of places. Tell your friends, come on down and get involved in the community that is supportive of this show. On the social medias, just search for at Mr. Zeppo or hashtag Zencast, and you should be able to find it. You should be able to find, there is an official Facebook page for this podcast show, and you should just type in Almost Daily Zencast or just Zencast and get it. So yeah. Okay. Let's kick off today's show. There is so much to talk about, friends. And I want to point out that just as with Trump, I have shared the disclaimer meme that Biden will get an earful of my critical questions and political, satirical assessment of my opinion of how he's doing as the person and or puppet in office. I hope that's not offensive. I think all politics is theater. So all politicians play the role of being kind of a puppet to themselves, to their party, to ideological constructs that they believe in for whatever reason, which as a Zenist, which I don't even like calling it that, right? For reasons I've already explained on the show. And if you haven't heard me explain it, I mean, I'm complaining about ideological constructs. It should be clear. All isms, all things that become ists and isms, become methodologies of conditioning the mind. Now, I'm not making the absolutist, monolithic, completely just full-on accusation that all forms of cultural and political ideology are mental slavery. I have on occasion in the past perhaps quipped that with dripping sarcasm in response to someone's commentary on social media and whatnot, and in direct telecoms with people. But I'm also an anti-absolutist, right, friends? If you've been tuning into the show, you know that I do not think I try to avoid thinking in any sort of monolithic, judgmental, absolutist, judgmental, totalitarian, judgmental blocks about others, especially once you get into like identity politics. I'm not a big fan of identity politics. I don't like to play political games like that. So I say Zenist with some dripping sarcasm, in as much as that in true Zen, in the truest form of Buddhist Zen, whatever you want to call it, there is no ism anymore, right? Like we identify the raft as a raft and we leave it by the side of the river, as the analogy would work. For anyone really confused what I'm talking about, here's what I mean. Confucius, whoever he was, right? The historical figure known as Confucius speaks on this in their writings quite clearly. The human animal requires some form of education, some form of bridling the mind, some form of giving form, giving shape, giving functionality to the wild whims and whimsical shenanigans and capabilities of the free and formless mind. Otherwise, an efficient and functioning society will not be sustainable if you want to achieve society. If for the betterment of all, you want to achieve that which we point to with the word society, Confucius says, we need some conditioning. And also, once that conditioning makes an individual a functioning member of society, before it gets toxic, before it becomes a methodology of oppression, before it becomes a means by which individuals are abused by a collective of powerful people who understand how the conditioning works, each individual must be liberated from that conditioning and shown their truest nature, that they can then live on this earth both in peaceful, and this word is controversial today because it's been turned into a political football, but I use it thoughtfully, in peaceful compliance, in peaceful and groovy. And I'm not being silly. I'm throwing that word in too as a sort of like archetype of words. I want to reboot it, re-envision it, reimagine it, and represent it to the world, re-engineer it a little bit with a spiritual bent, right? In a peaceful and groovy compliance with the society that is working towards the greatest good for all. And also, we then must liberate our minds from that, right? And not allow that system of systems to become toxic and oppressive and manipulative and a treadmill of distraction, which prevents us from liberating our minds from any and all forms of mental conditioning. Now, why would Confucius, however many generations ago, because I don't have the math in front of me, why would Confucius write about this as a philosopher of spirit and mind? And declare it as an important, not just truth, but because truth is also a loaded term that's been turned into a political football. But here's a term that no one likes to use anymore: wisdom. As in, like, understanding, comprehension, based on the organic reality as it exists, not some ideological constructs distracting you from that by making you work or strive for or masturbate to mentally, emotionally, theoretically, intellectually, spiritually, and or physically to some idea of what should be. For as other Zen masters point out, like, living in the mind of what should be is the source of all suffering. It's what causes physical conflict, which then renders physical suffering, but it's the source of all spiritual, emotional, intellectual, mental, internal suffering, which then becomes the problematic driver of real life, tangible, physical conflict and violence and hatred and suffering, which becomes, vicious cycles trapped within vicious cycles. What the hell am I talking about? And what does that have to do with dear old Joe Biden's 234th day in office? Well, as I was trying to say, it was like, I started a tangent, which I then branched away from, about these two memes, right? Like, if Trump supporters don't like it that, in this country we have the freedom to criticize whoever's in office, then they can move to some place where that sort of thing is illegal. And I forget what, some country where some conservative extremist Muslim power sect is in control is used often in those memes. And then I made an alteration, like I fixed it version meta collaboratively of this anonymous meme. It had no author on it. But I just put Biden in because I'm like, if Biden supporters start getting precious and then turn a blind eye, we're gonna have a difference of opinion. And here's what we're gonna do, friends. We're gonna play some music. I think I've purged this list of any recently played tracks. But if I'm replaying something I've already played at you in the last 3 episodes, I deeply apologize. It's not intentional. Here is a live to tape recording session. And for those who don't know, DJ Zed is an imaginary friend of mine He's a literary fictional figure that exists only in sci-fi, which I have not finished writing. But he's also the being, the personae, the character, the member of the Zeppoverse that is responsible for all this lovely digital robot dance music that you're listening to. These are like rare, exotic, electronic, remixified, loopified digital assets from an ulterior timeline where all people are already robots and always were, at least to their knowledge and their own immediate narrative history. And they think they invented dancing in some sort of, we just sort of discovered it recently. Apparently, other beings in other timelines or in other places have known about this for a very long time, DJ said. But here's a live to tape session, one of the live to tape sessions, which for those who don't know what that means that DJ Zed had no opportunity to edit the track after laying down whatever combination of audio loops, right? Like, so he aggregates and then sort of quote unquote bunny ears plays with these various audio assets, and then orchestrates and edits and sort of refines them usually. But sometimes he just drops these tracks at you with no opportunity to edit or refine them afterwards, because he's recording it instead of to a sort of digital editing track system. He's recording it straight to a master audio file that gets dumped right into this playlist for the show. And without further ado, here is Hardcore Techno 101 L2T Antagonistic Maneuvers, a DJ Zed Dancescapes of Doom audio track for your listening pleasure. Dance like you're a robot, dancing at a robot discotheque for robots dancing. If you want to join us on a hot, sweltery September night, I tuned that out really hard and fast. Sorry, DJ Zed, that was unprofessional of me. We're going to be doing a late night, midnight session of exotic robot dance music pretty soon. It happens to be Friday. If I don't blow my voice out today, we might just do that later tonight. Let me share with you something I posted on the social media clouds of poster webs over 6 years ago. I quote myself, we can waste time arguing over whose ideology on things is closer to the truth, and I have the truth in quotes, or we can unite and transcend our differences in order to heal each other and really fix the problems that we face. But we don't have time to do both. I don't know about you, but I vote for uniting and transcending. And the reason that I want to be explicit about that, friends, is because there's an active vested interest in getting all y'all to vote for violence with your mind, with your belief. And given you've just listened to the last two parter super deluxe special episode I did on belief, I think you'll understand the resonance of that statement. Moving on, let's go visit and discuss and unpack something. Now, some people who might tune into this show might, right out of hand, baby with the bathwater, just dismiss the shit out of the following, discussion here, because I'm basing it on the work of a website that these people might not approve of, that they might automatically dismiss as hoax material, as hoax content. But as I've pointed out repeatedly, in many timelines, in many embodiments, in many time frames, in many branches and trunks and many iterations, and in many different instances of this podcast, either here or in alternate dimensions, the greatest hoax of all time is getting people to dismiss anything and everything that they disagree with, don't like, don't want to understand, can't comprehend, refuse to question and consider as a hoax. The greatest hoax of all time is getting you to call everything a hoax and believing yourself when you come to that decision. But getting you to do it knee-jerk, ego style, like you're the king of the world and you know better than everyone else because you've watched these 11 YouTube videos. And I didn't mean to do a weird accent from any particular origin. That was just my voice getting weird because I was annoyed by the very idea. It's such a hubris and ego brought to you. These thoughts here brought to you by Hubris and Negro. It's like, what are you thinking? Everything can't be a hoax. You can't just go around life thinking, just because Santa Claus isn't real doesn't mean that everything on the planet is a hoax. Because that would mean if this one penny hasn't dropped in your piggy bank yet, if you've been waiting for this shoe to drop, here it goes. That means you are a hoax. Dun, dun, dun. Mind explode emoji. If everything's a hoax, then you are a hoax, and you don't exist, right? And what kind of madness is it? Why would you vote for an ideological construct, a mental belief system that renders you yourself not alive, not real, not legitimately exactly as you should be, and also something better, right? If and mind you, for those of you who haven't caught on, almost all my questions are anchored in the what if scenario, not from the TV show. Don't sue me, owners of that TV show. No one owns that question. That's a brilliant show, by the way. We're going to do a special episode and talk about it, as long as they aren't too annoyed by my referencing it. I don't think it violates anything. What if the universe is a living holographic fractal wherein ideology, the mental constructs you cling to in your mind, are tools for manifestation? And it doesn't work in like stupid, childish, wish an elephant into the room, wish $1 million suddenly on the table in gold bars. It doesn't work that way. It works according to the laws of physics, of which we only understand a very small percentage. Right? So like science and physics, all good, great. Keep trying to be as uncorrupt as possible because it's not a monolith one way or the other. And they are not a monolith of virtue either, dear friends. Right? Even as we rectify the false argument that all science is a monolith of corruption, which it's not. Nothing can be. Hello, have you met human beings? Okay, I've gone off about that long enough. We're going over to, and this is a real life, unpaid for referencing of facts as reported by this website, which I don't think violates any terms. You can go check this out for yourself, make sure I'm not misrepresenting anything. Head on over to politifact.com and do your due diligence. And, hold me to account. Have I done the due diligence? Have I looked up who the Poynter Institute is? I'll be honest with you, I can't remember. I may have. I may not have in this particular timeline. I may have in other timelines, and that's why I have the sense that I did. I may have in my mind. I may have and just forgot what I found out. But there's no glaring red flags in my mind that I shouldn't. Right? So I've done enough due diligence to be like, I don't think that they are publishing lies. And I don't buy into that everything's a hoax, right? Like, cool your jets, my friends over there in that extreme level of extremity. There's no need. On the front page of PolitiFact, actually it's not true. You got to type in Biden tracker. There's PolitiFact /truthometer/promises /Biden promise tracker. Too complicated of an address, guys. Right there. I go to media websites because I'm a media commentator. I'm going to comment on your media. Make your website landing page for something like this snappier, simpler. It should be politifact.com /Biden tracker. Done. No one else seems to own that. WTF, question mark, question mark, question mark. Let's go. Let's just put in Biden tracker. Real world, real-time commentary. The only thing that comes up in terms of like other searches in my search bar thing is Biden promise tracker over at PolitiFact / too long of a website name.com. If I just search Biden tracker, we got trackbiden.com. That's good. That's good. Well done, guys. But like free advice for anybody listening, if you're running your own website or whatever, and you can make your own subdomains, I can pronounce words correctly at 8:20 in the morning on a Friday. Find the punchy hashtag level, like 2 words max, 3 words max, like landing name. Like in this case, for something like this, Biden tracker, it should be yourwebsitename.com whatever / Biden tracker or tracking Biden, tracker Biden, whatever, it doesn't matter. But just like, boom, make it easy. So that people like me, when we're telling other people to go check it out, it isn't a garbly gook of too many words. We don't need 7 space bars of subdivision. Why are you organizing your website like that anyways? Oh, for assets and stuff. Great. Make a landing flippy bits page, a splash page that's the simple thing, and then build the branch of envelopes of thing hierarchy stuff inside of that. So it's / .index. And then it's done. All you have to type in is your website name / president tracker. It doesn't matter which president. And if I may be so bold, whoever's in office, there should be a minimum, there should be a competing field of independently run president tracker websites. Hello, right? Isn't that what the whole point of public discourse as the larger an envelope that contains within it journalism, right? And the news, because the news empire, there's a whole bunch of things we can critique it for, right? But let's not go off on tangents. We were going to talk about Biden. It's day 234. Apparently, and again, this is according to their work over here on the horribly named address, PolitiFact, Biden Promise Tracker, because they're specifically addressing promises. So it's Biden's Promise Tracker Scorecard is the first big thing. And apparently, according to the disclaimer blurb above, it's about 100 of the most important campaign promises. That's their catchphrase. They are monitoring the 100 most important campaign promises. Blah, 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 and a bunch of other stuff. They previously did a tracker for Donald Trump. And I wish I could go... Oh, no, see, I wanted to right-click on that, not left-click on that. I'm just making a mess of my own show. Biden seemed... I wish I could go over to the other one and punch in a day and be like, day 234. So I can compare on par, same day, what they were tracking. And it might be possible. I don't know. I think it's like, case closed. Wait, this is done. I don't think I can be like, show me. There's no... Sorry, guys. I can't afford to contribute. Not yet. Wait until my podcast goes viral. And then I'll be a contributor to all the things. Just manifesting out loud. Not trying to infringe my own boundaries. So... yeah, I can't go to the other tab and like look up so I can do a on-day comparison. Tragically. So hey, shout out to you guys if you're listening over there at the Pointer Institute. There's a feature request from a fan of your website who happens to also be a media commentator on his own podcast show. According to this work here, and they have click-throughs for the principles of how they do this, and so apparently they're trying to be transparent about how they produce these numbers. Promises broken, 0%. Now, if we go over to their Trump page, I think this is case closed, so it's all 4 years worth of tracking done and over with, compiled. 53%. Of the, and I believe the same thing, tracking the 100 the top 100 promises that good old Donnie made during his original campaign. 53% of promises made during his campaign were just straight broken, according to their systematic tracking of such things using statistical analysis of statements made and then actions taken. So Biden is apparently, they're reporting 0%. Now, it's only been 234 days. He's got plenty of time to flub, and he's already floundered a bit in my personal political opinion. Here's the interesting thing. Stalled out, he's got a 2% number. I guess because it's over, that stalled out number is at 0%. And although there's a little bit of graphic icon color in the final column for in the works over here on the Trump tab, it's also statistically, numerically at 0%. It's reporting 0%. And here's an interesting one. Comparing, for Biden, in the works, 42% of the top 100 political campaign promises made apparently are in the works. Something's being done. Already kept 12 promises. And in the final column, which is in between the leftmost and the middle, is compromise. There's a 1% compromise so far at day 234. Good times. Now, I don't know that I did a 234-day special episode during the Trump era over there, but I was most certainly commenting about everything going on. So if you're curious, please join me, as this show is indeed a sort of time capsule journey back to real-time thoughts and opinions commentary throughout the Trumptopian era. As currently archived here on Sprecher.com, episodes 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, or whatever, are not directly related to Trump, because I wanted to give it a sort of pre-Trumptopian era vibe by presenting a bunch of collaborative stuff that I did with some folks that we had hopes at the time, stalled out by various things, not the least of which was the horrible pandemic and the various issues therein. But we were hoping to sort of launch our own little spin-off crossover podcast of just us and them, with a little bit of their music and a little bit of me driving the discussion as if we were a panel talk show. Shout out to Gazuda Music, by the way. That's you. If you're tuning into the show, I don't know that you are, but if you are, I still miss those plans, and I hope we can sort things out and get on top of it. But, we must catch up, so we'll be in touch. But I digress. Interesting stats for the opening heat, the opening sprint, the opening mad dash from the first to the first 100 days, which obviously I think was spun to be as rosy and as like, look, isn't it better? Doesn't everything just feel better with this guy in the room? And we'll have to take a deep dive after a little bit of a musical break here as we track into our 45th minute, past our 45th minute of airtime. And I'm very curious what it is, that's Trump, what it is over here on the Biden that he's already kept. I don't know that I can sort. But there's definitely like a breakdown. As I think I've commented on too many pictures of the same guy's face staring at me, making a weird face. So we can get into a sort of closed case current scenario comparison across track records, which of course will be politically engaging and fun to do. But then there's a sort of transcendent perspective. Like we can verbally joust about whose political party is most righteous. But let's remember here, folks, my whole argument is that all political parties are guilty of, to some degree or another, consciously or unconsciously, physically or metaphysically, being complicit with each other, even sort of unwittingly, because they're all at the mercy of the same alarming sort of manipulation tools available to the very root source and cause of that which I casually call the system of oppression. Now, I'm not here to point fingers and accusations at anyone in too wild of a crazy way, but I'm going to remind you that I am the author of a particular meme that reads, "We blame society, but we are society." This system of oppression, right? The big secret, I think, the big aha realization is that we are not separate from it. I'm not pulling any triggers, right? But I'm not, and I'm a pacifist, arguably, in theory. And I'm a spiritual exploration or experimentalist. I believe that we owe ourselves a rigorous exploration of all things metaphysical and spiritual in like making it the primary focus of our society in such a way that it is currently just marginalized and swept under the rug as if it were not important. But that's all over the place, right? My show is all over the place. Mostly because I haven't done it in a while, and my whole rhythm to it isn't firing on all cylinders. So what I'm fascinated by right now, in the current moment of the actual 234th day. Oh, and full disclosure, I woke up, I made my mushroom coffee alternative and my two cups of tea, which is my daily routine on the days where I just jump right into podcasting first thing in the morning. And I have no idea about any breaking news as of this morning, right? I haven't checked into what's going on. And the rest of the nation, given that I'm stuck over here on the West Coast, the rest of the nation's in the future, technically, already experiencing whatever news is breaking. So I'll be back at you relatively short with anything particularly weird or unusual or out of the typical zone or of interest in a special segment I lovingly call News Breaking News. Should anything arise when I go and have brunch and check in with what's going on in the world. But as of my last conscious effort to sort of assess, analyze, and then think about by not thinking about the bubble that we're in, I find it fascinating that I've already done an episode called has it ever been this obvious, or something to that effect? Could it ever be more obvious? The wording is a little slippery in my mind, but it's out there somewhere in the archive of past episodes. Go track it down and tune into it in the not too distant future. But I want to restate that whole sentiment in a nutshell. This current set of curiously blundering actions, the declining approval rating of Uncle Joe, and the sort of coinky-dinky, isn't it a strange coincidence that somehow or another the left, because I'm lobbying this critique at the whole political party, the left somehow manages to say and do things that are just close enough to the fear-mongering that the alarmists and the extremists on the other side are all fixated on, as to give them a false sense of self-righteous confidence that they're actually manifesting these ideologically polemic horrors, when arguably I don't know that they are. Arguably, goalposts are moved, right? Like, what's the craziest thing we've heard in the last, never mind 6 months, in the last 6 weeks, 9 weeks, is that Trump was going to get reinstated in August, right? Some people believed that. Some people didn't. Some people in the Trump camp were instantly like, oh, that's a left-wing talking point. I'm like, oh, really? Why are there so many Trump supporters ardently saying it then? People at conventions, people in the audience at conventions saying it. It's a left-wing talking point? That's what I mean by double reverse psychology. It's a double echo chamber of double echo chambers, right? It's chaos, but well orchestrated. And it's not necessarily being done by this person or that person or this group or that group. Here's my big point, folks, not to be redundant. I just think that a lot of people don't quite, I don't know, maybe I'm unclear. I'm a big rambly fool, so I worry about it not making sense. All of it, from the worst case scenario that the rightists are freaking out about the leftists, which may or may not come true, and the worst case scenario that the leftists are freaking out about the rightists are supposedly doing, which may or may not come true, all of it is an engineered wedge issue system of systems, or an engineered system of wedge issues within wedge issues, right? A treadmill of distraction built on treadmills of distraction. or I'm a little cuckoo crazy and should only be allowed to write comic books wherein that's what's going on. But in a universe that's alive, where the collective ideological constructs of society are being responded to by the mechanics of physics. Let's give the mechanics of physics consciousness, although it being a sort of, abstract, non-human-like consciousness, right? Because we over-personify our gods and make them petty and dramatic, just like people, and they may not be quite so human. But the very rocks beneath us, the very air we breathe, the very Gaian body, to borrow a term which most of the ideologists out there are arguing between flat Earth and round Earth, etc. Because it's always an us versus them. My ideology is better than your ideology kind of argument. Do you not see? Red versus blue, left versus right, me versus you, flat Earth versus round Earth, etc., etc. I made the meme. You saw the pattern, did you not? The very Gaian body that the flat earthers and the globists reduce in material, usually, because there are obviously usually exceptions to the rule, but in terms of what most of them are talking about, they're talking about a materialist rendition or rendering of something that is actually much more complex, much more richly alive in the broadest, fullest, all caps sense of the word alive, as in the very force of nature we call life itself is alive, right? And I warn you, dear friends, because there's many different ways by which the chaotic system of psyops within psyops of neurolinguistic programming embedded within neurolinguistic programming, right? To keep saying it in pairs of redundant terms, because it's not just me being cartoonish. It's sort of how it works, I think. Wherever you go, ego is at the root cause, right? In this living universe, blame does not lay just in the groups of people enacting the bad things, although they must be held to account. People doing bad things in the world must be held to account. People pontificating horrible, horrific ideological constructs must also sort of be held to account. But the living reality itself, the thing to which we are all a puppet, life itself, the complex spiritual mechanism, organic mechanism, which renders us and brings us into being, which gives birth to us, therein there is rot, there is causation of corruption, there is what I like to use the following term to point to it, because it adjusts, I think once you really wrap your brain around it, it adjusts the perspective. Spiritual trauma. As soon as you start thinking about it in terms of it being trauma, and that our collective souls have been traumatized, then we can sort of step away from the conflict-oriented thinking of, well, we got to beat these evil people, whoever they are, and kill them all, to we must heal ourselves and each other and everyone. Having said that, let me lay down for you another audio track. What the hell did we play last? I think we swiped it off the list so as to not be redundant. That's the whole point, right? Neo Soul on the Remix Live, a 101 live to tape learning audio track from back in the day, or is this a more recent one? I'm confused. I don't remember. Learning New Tricks with Minimalism, DJ Zed, Dancescapes of Doom. Gather your friends and pop in your earphones and listen to any of the all music robot dance session episodes and have yourself a not MIDI with a D, mini with an N, a mini dance party. Either, out in a park somewhere or in some large open space where you can give yourself a little bit of distance. Because while it's great to dance alone in your home, like you really don't care, like no one's watching, or as if the world were your audience, either way, there's something else to it with other people. And put a pin in that, because we've done a whole episode about the anthropological significance of dance and why it's one of the oldest cultural traditions in existence. But here we are, back on the show. We'll be doing, hopefully, as I was saying earlier, a new episode I think we're going to be calling them midnight sessions, even though we don't always record them or present them live at midnight. Because sometimes that just doesn't work out for me, folks. I got to take care of myself, too, right? But back to the point of the show. It's the 234th day, and Biden did the one thing I really hoped, and that he seemed to be indicating he wasn't gonna. I really hoped he wouldn't do. He just did it, and he did it all wrong, too. I'm not a big fan of mandates. I also don't think they're tyranny. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I think it is. I'm also not opposed historically to some of the most powerful political governmental mandates ever to come down the pike, like desegregation was not an evil thing. I'm on that side of history, right? Like, I think that it took federal governmental action to enforce the dismantling of segregation, because segregation was morally wrong. But the problem is the white separatists, the white nationalists, the white supremacists, for there's no other term for it, they believe the exact inverse, right? They believe that segregation... Why am I talking about that now? Because I don't want to get lost in the overwhelming chorus of idiotic criticism against Biden. He absolutely has the presidential authority to do what he just did. I have a much more nuanced opinion than just he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. It's not against. No. Do you understand your own system and how it works? And I brought segregation up as an example because, as is being highlighted by various outlets, it took federal action, right? It took the federal government incentivizing, in some cases, as in the very late breaking adjustment in southern hospitals, where enclave, some sort of disregard for the general dismantling of segregation that had been already going on for over a year or two, I think, whenever that happened. So, great. And I totally get it. Like, the alarmists that fear that this is the beginning of a slippery slope of encroachment towards complete and total dictatorship. I mean, the irony is, like, the same sort of fear-mongering is being thrown around on the left about the right. That's my point. If you were to drop by my personal Facebook page right now, you'd notice that my head banner image is a meme I made borrowing from an old comic book image, and the text that I used to make it a meme, unique and its own special iterance of itself, is the following: when Americans accuse their fellow Americans of being brainwashed, hello, it's a duopoly echo chamber of manipulation, folks. It's two wings, one bird. And the roots, here's the big hard pill to swallow that I keep coming back to because I think it's important. The roots are spiritual. Yes, it's spiritual warfare. And here's the final thing that people who think they get it kind of rush off in an enthusiastic swarm of let's go do spiritual warfare instead of waiting for the final shoe to drop. I think the spiritual calling, and therefore the solution, is healing, right? And a balanced attitude towards understanding that no matter what we do and no matter what achievements we achieve spiritually, we are bound here until such a time that this place gives birth to us. Because this living universe is literally a cosmic being's uterus. And therefore, we should probably slow our roll on how foaming at the mouth, quick to violence, we're normalizing all our politics in being, because a Pachamama or Mother Nature or Guy in Mind or whatever you want to call her, the divine feminine which is giving birth to us as a species of life, probably has very little interest in all of this political shenanigans, right? Biological reality is real. So one of the problems from the Trump era that I found absolutely frustrating was that everyone fell for what seems to me to be an obvious engineered wedge issue. It's just like flat Earth versus round Earth or globe Earth versus flat Earth argumentation, but germ theory versus terrain theory. Okay? These are two ideological constructs, which, if you understand what that term means, they are human beings' cumulative and, in theoretically, consensus-built scientific attempts to describe the organic reality we observe around us that are humbling, have the self-contained humbling ingredients of theoretically being self-aware of the fact of being flawed, limited, and incomplete. Now, you know you're being manipulated when you're led and, by the nose, by the hook, line, and sinker that you swallowed, into believing in a polemic, us versus them, absolutist, monolithic, judgmental, not discerning, discernment-driven, judgmental and ultimately sort of hateful kind of way, in believing that these ideological, theoretical models, which are inherently meant to be refined and revised, because in theory, all scientific understanding is it's old hat. It's knowledge. It's been acknowledged repeatedly, and it's embedded in the procedure itself. Flawed and limited, right? And must be upgraded with the pursuit of new information and new understanding. If you've been led to believe that they're these mutually exclusive, monolithic emblems for truth and evil, or something like that, some polemic wherein only one can exist, and it's in zero-sum game terminology, the other must be obliterated because it's so wrong, you're being hijacked mentally, because that's not the way the world works. That's not the way reality works, right? Point to me in reality where something does that in an absolutist, monolithic way, and you will find yourself rushing out into the world thinking you'll find something really quick and then struggling to find anything that actually does that. Because you'll have to sit, you might project that assumption on something, but then you'll have to spend X amount of time proving that through observation. Repeated verification of a phenomena must occur. You can't just achieve some sort of logistical, logical conclusion and demand that it be considered truth because it sounds good to you. Sorry, that's not the way reality works. You have to observe it in reality. And reality is weirder than we may lead ourselves to think. Okay, but I digress. The whole point of this episode, because, well, like I said, it was a star-crossed sort of crossover, almost daily Zencast with Good Morning Trumptopia mashed together in my mind. I've said this before, and I'll say it again right here. The response to this very real, viral pandemic has been ridiculously, absurdly, chaotically, and offensively wrong in its attitude, incorrect, flawed in its approach and its logistics, and it's seemingly riddled with incompetence. The most current aggravating, what's really grinding my gears or chapping my hide, to borrow a couple of phrases, which may or may not be copyrighted, and if they are, I'll redact them. I don't mean to infringe on anybody's copyrights. I think they're also common parlance, common use. Depends on which universe you're in. What's really bugging me now is that, now I forgot what it was. From the get-go, from the very beginning, I have been of the humble opinion that the strategy should be organized in a completely different manner, right? Long before we shut down everything, and long before we shut down everything again, we shoulda, coulda, woulda done Operation Warp Speed, but instead of not on the what's the word? Why am I so, wow, my brain just didn't want to say it. The vaccine, I think I'm a little bit like, obviously the interwebs is alarmistly monitoring all uses of that word. And I'm not trying to spread this information. I'm sharing, I respect that the science is what it is, and as all science ought to be, it must be double-checked, verified again, and tested again and again for years and years. Because no matter how adamantly people say it might be settled, science is always, if it's free of corruption, about verifying and improving our understanding through repeated verification and experimentation in new directions. And updating of all of the information and of sharing that information so that others can confirm the information through repeating and rebuilding and re-examining independently whatever the data portrays and whatever the actual experiment may be. Testing should have been first. Priority number one. That before we did anything else, we should have made a special, like, industry-wide emergency authorization to, like, get the best possible testing mechanisms and multi-tiered, right? So that you don't have to rely on one thing and then that one thing is a flaw and everyone freaks out at the flaw. How, this is the one way that it doesn't work very well, or the one way that it can be critiqued. A multi-tiered, multi-pronged, multi-system approach. Not to oppress the world or to implant microchips on everyone, because that nonsense I do not believe is true. There were too many competing theories for all of them to be true. They can't all be true. That doesn't make any fucking sense. And I'm not talking about theories. I'm talking about how I think. I'm talking about my own proposal for how it shoulda, coulda, woulda been. Testing should have been priority number one. Should have been available for free everywhere. At schools, at places of work, at home, for people at home that want to make sure, right? And they should have been available in different formats, so you can do a quick and easy test, and then once you get a negative on the quick and easy test, you can easily, at home, for free, then take the much more serious hardcore test to find out at higher level of granularity, right? And my beef today is that yesterday, historically speaking, in the flow of timelines, not according to some political agenda, but just in the mechanisms of how cumulative momentum builds and then manifests reality, it was President Biden's opportunity to create a fulcrum event. And instead, he triggered and activated all the alarmists and the conspiracy theorists because he did the one thing he sort of kept suggesting he didn't think was appropriate to do, which was to mandate the use of a big pharmaceutical product, right? While also standing against Texas's move to strip all women of female bodily autonomy, right? Confusing and crazy times to live in. Some of, such extremes, both in the weather and in the politics, that it becomes increasingly plausible and understandable and almost obvious why it is some people do literally live in the sort of redonkulous fear that the actual end of the biblical apocalypse is happening now. It's not. I'm fairly certain that it's not. That is just all, in my humble opinion, as political entertainment satire expressed through the lens of fan fictioning the world itself in a sort of sci-fi, fantasy, alternate universe kind of way, stay tuned. I'm actually trying to harness all the disparate like bits and pieces into a more cohesive, episodic literary expression of what that whole set of activities is meant to be soon. So hang in there, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, please drop on by to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo, where you will find the official and authoritative collection of all of my various arts and crafts that are available to view online, which includes my rough drafts and sample chapters of my science fiction book series, which I commonly collectively refer to as the Zeppoverse. As always, thanks for tuning in. My brain splattered all over the inside of your mind. There's too much to talk about. That's what's up. And this is my first return to trying to do this episodic podcast entertainment show almost daily for your consumption opportunities. Here's a little bit of outgoing music, and then maybe the final doodle dad, and then a kicker. But already 80 minutes. Too long, Mr. Zeppo. I thought you were going to keep them snappy and short. We've come full circle. In practical terms, I'm disappointed, right? And I haven't even touched on the slightly more egregious, slightly more politically bungled withdrawal decision from the prior sort of set of breaking news that I did not report on. So you'll have to tune in to a more well thought out and structured episode of Good Morning Trumptopia, the post-Trumptopian Blue Tyranny special segment of the show. But as always, I humbly thank you. And I leave you with this bit of EDM epidemic groove pad digital audio asset curiously titled The Long Haul Deniers by DJ Zed's forthcoming album by DJ Zed from his forthcoming album, Dance Fictional album, because it's not a real album. We're not actually putting out actual albums, are we, DJ Zed? We're just referring to them in the literature and then sampling the music that would be available for now. I think that's the actual thing, so don't sue me, anybody. Dancecapes of Doom that's the name of the current bit that we're working. Yes, okay, here it comes. The universe is a living being, holographic and fractal in its structure and form and function. Life itself is reality. Life itself is reality. The universe is a living being, holographic and fractal in its structure, form, and function. Life itself is reality. Reality itself is life. You are one cell, or structure, unit, building block of living, autonomous, ambulatory flesh and bone inside a massive meta-being who is made up of worlds within worlds, universes within universes. The only thing preventing you from phenomenologically experiencing this reality I have just described to you as the true nature of all that which you can encompass with the label reality is your belief constructs that you cling to in your mind. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts, friends. As always, thanks for tuning in. I have been your humble, if slightly irrationally, sporadically, ramblingly, spiralingly, out of control podcast host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. As always, I reference you to the imaginary corkboard up and to the right, and all past episodes. Just jump on in, spiral around, and keep those constructs, those imaginary tools active in your mind as you listen to the show, and you'll weave together some mind-blowing social commentary and questioning of reality, I think. Join the community and share your thoughts. Find the show on social media. Come on down to the main platform of the show, Sprecher.com/show/Zencast. Until next time. And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily Zencast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.